Hello class, welcome to Unit 7.5, Factoring Trinomials, when our a equals 1. When we talk about the trinomials, the first thing we're looking at here when we say a equals 1 is going to be talking about this number out front. So the coefficient we see in front of the x squared is going to be a 1. And when you look at trinomials, you're going to be looking at the standard form or standard notation is going to be like ax squared plus bx plus c, where just a, b, and c are numbers. So when we look at these, it's going to be important to understand, especially as we go to try to factor. When we factor, there's going to be this x method that's going to make your life a little bit easier. So the first thing here is we're going to be looking at the top section is going to be the C, and the bottom section is going to be the B. Okay, because what that's going to do is that's going to kind of get those numbers from our problem. The second thing we need to or the third thing here that we need to look at is we are going to get those side two numbers by finding what multiplies to get to the top and whatever adds or subtracts to get to the bottom. And also kind of here's this saying like your factors are going to help. So the numbers you found will also be added or subtracted to get that bottom. So when we look at these values, when you think about this, this is your C. This is going to go up top. This is your B. So that's going to go down to the bottom. And then the question is, what factors are going to multiply to get to 7? And add to get to 8. So if you look at your factors of 7, well, the only thing you can get with that is 1 and 7. So it kind of makes it a no-brainer what's going to get into the bottom. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 plus 7 is 8. And then in our next examples, we'll kind of talk about how to kind of go from there. Okay, so when we look, trying to put this all together, we have this x squared plus 8x plus 12, and we are trying to factor. This means we're trying to break it up into what were the two original binomials that we had before we get to that value. So when we look at this, that x method is going to be very helpful. Because if we're trying to backtrack, remember, we're trying to figure out when we multiply what's going to get a 12, and when we add them together, it's going to be an 8. Now, if we look at this x squared, we know that this is going to be x times x to get our x squared. So when you start looking over here at this little x method, what we're really trying to figure out is what multiplies to be a 12, but also adds to become an 8. Because we know here it has to be, in order to get this plus symbol, we know it either has to be a plus times plus or a minus times minus. Now, by this being a plus as well, that takes out your minus factor. So when you look at this 12, it may be helpful to write down all of your factors, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And what we're going to be looking at is, well, which one of these pairs also gives us a plus 8? Well, 1 and 12 is going to give us 13. 2 and 6 gives us 8. So that's going to be our winner. 3 and 4 would give us a 7, so that's no good. And really what we need to think about here is 2 times 6 is 12. And if we're looking for a plus 8, that's going to be a plus plus. And really what that tells us here is x plus 2 and x plus 6, that's going to be our combination of when we start multiplying this out, whether we use the box method or FOIL method. What we just found out there is, like we said, x times x is going to give us that x squared. Now 6x and 2x, that's going to give us our 8x. And then, of course, the 6 times 2 is 12. So if you think about that, we came right back to our answer, confirming those are good. So let's take a little bit more examples without, hopefully, a little less talking here. Okay, when we look at example B, Again, we know we're trying to get back to what were those original terms. Now this one here, we still know it's x times x is x squared. Now this one here, we're kind of paying attention to our plus sign. Well, that means when we go down here, it has to be the same. Now the minus is going to tell us minus minus. So when we go over here to our x method, we put a 12 up top, put the negative 7 down there. Well, what were those factors of 12 again? 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Well, if we are going to multiply these, we already kind of talked about negative, negative to get a positive and get that negative in the middle. But now the two factors we're looking at is, well, 3 times 4 is 12. 4, well, again, we're trying to add or subtract. So if we're trying to get a negative 7, both of these need to be negative. And that's going to be the big thing there. And we already kind of looked at that. So now we're looking at an x minus 3, x minus 4. And if we just kind of double check our work, which we'll just kind of do here in our heads, x times x is x squared. And then really the only ones we need to kind of really check here is, well, if we do that x times 4, that's a negative 4x. We do that negative 3x. That is going to give us the negative 7. The x times x gives us x squared. And then negative 4 times negative 3 gives us plus 12. Well, that is going to be our negative 7. So we're good. Okay, look at example C here. Notice here that this is a negative sign. So what that's going to tell us here, let's put a negative 12 up top. We got that plus 4 here. Now the fact that that's a negative sign, that's going to tell us when we look at our answers, that's going to tell us we have to do a plus times a negative to get us our negative 12. Because x times x is still x squared. But now we got to look at these options and say, if I'm looking for a negative 12, and I'm looking at 1 and 12, again 2 and 6, and 3 and 4, that's going to tell us that one of these signs is positive, one of these signs is negative. So if we look at 12 and 1, that's 11. 6 minus 2 is 4. Well, 4 is what we want. So if we look at here and we're looking at 6 and 2, one of these is going to have to be negative to get that negative 12. And one of these signs on the either side have to be a negative to get us a plus 4. Well, if we do negative 6, that's going to give us a negative 4. So what we really want to do is say, oh, 6 minus 2 is 4. So when we go over here to our answer, we find out it's a plus 6 minus 2. Again, as you FOIL, and we have that x squared minus 2x plus 6x minus 12. This middle term does become a plus 4x. So, confirming this is our answer. Okay, so fourth example here, x squared minus 4x minus 12. Not too different than the last one. So again, we're looking at this saying like, oh, I know my x times x equals x squared. And because this is negative, that's going to tell us one of them has to be plus minus again. But again, it's all about finding that magic combination. Once again, with the 12, we got the 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Those are our possibilities. And just like last one, we have a 6 times 2. But now if we want this negative, that's going to tell us negative 6 plus 2 to get our answer. And again, if we multiply out, we got that x squared. We got the minus 6x plus 2x minus 12, which gives us that negative 4x. And we are good to go. So when we look back at this ax squared plus bx plus c, if we're looking at a positive c value, which is what we're talking about first, this is going to tell us that these signs will be the same. Now, if this b value stays a positive, then we know that both of these factors will also be positive. But if we look at that b value and it's negative, that's when we know both of our signs will be negative. Okay. Now, the other thing here we're looking at is if the value of c is negative, well, that means the signs will be different. Okay, that means we'll have to have one positive, one negative. Now, the sign of the larger factor matches the sign of the b value. So if that b is negative, then we need to make sure that the negative sign is bigger. If the b is positive, then we know it needs to be positive. Okay, so let's take a look at practicing that. Okay, so pause here and work through these problems, testing out that X method and solving. Okay, so check your work and make sure we're kind of matching these all up. And then make sure you kind of finish up the rest of your assignments. That is kind of your introduction to trinomials when a equals 1. Have a nice day.